There's 4 words that every retiree would absolutely dread to hear. Get back to work. And yet, there's talk that the US federal government is discussing the idea of bringing people back from the retirement. Yes, could you possibly imagine being retired, spending all those years and those dreams planning, putting away the finances, and starting your career in the third part of your life, which is retirement? You know, you start traveling, you've got these plans, you're starting projects, and maybe even got a little side hustle started, possibly a little side business that you decided, you know what, I need something to do into my retirement, so I'm just going to start up this little business. Maybe it's a t-shirt shop, maybe it's a little food stand or a drink stand on some beach there in southern Florida, whatever it is. A lot of people, once they get into retirement, they've got their heart set on it. Now, while sadly, we've heard the results, there are people that do get into retirement and they effectively go back to work, largely because they don't want to. In most cases, people go back to work after they've been retired for a couple of key reasons. One of them is generally financial. In other words, maybe they didn't save enough. They find it's tough to make ends meet. And now the reality sets in that they need to find other sources of revenue. That's one reason. Another reason why a lot of people end up going back to work after they're retired is quite simple. It's a human nature. It's a human factor. They're missing people. The idea of not having somebody around, a lot of times going to work gave them that feeling, that sense of belonging, the social atmosphere, the social network. Whether they like these people or not, there was always somebody around to talk about. It's just, that's what makes a lot of people tick. It's that human interaction. It's no different than wildlife. They always talk about animals in flocks, in herds, in schools of fish. Because why? Because they're naturally gravitating to each other. And while some animals are lone wolves, the vast majority of animals travel in packs or groups. And that's often how many humans are. And so a lot of people, once they retire, they feel as though they've missed something, they've missed out. And so that's why some people end up going back to work after they've been retired for a while. But there's something new going on with the federal government, that they're looking at some issues and they're having to deal with it accordingly. Yes, of course, welcome back to the hustle and welcome back to the grind. And let's talk about this momentarily, because I was browsing earlier this morning and I came across a little article where they're saying Elon, of course, right-hand man, of course, to Donald Trump, they're now looking at, as a result of a lot of these issues with airlines that we've been seeing, and certainly there's been no surprise. We've seen all kinds of planes having incidents, even in the first part of 2025, and naturally at the end of 2024, there's been an absolutely astronomical number of plane catastrophes already. And it really begs the question, what's going on? What's happening? What's the issue here? Well, some of it could be for various reasons. Everybody thinks, well, okay, there's mechanical problems with the planes, or maybe there's something systemic or chronic with a particular brand. We know, the 737 MAX had some, issues a few years ago that they talked about, and some of that may have been quality control. Some of that might have been other related issues. However, there is a conversation about there's something more underlining, something more systemic than just, a single manufacturer or a particular type of plane. It's actually more related to something bigger, more widespread. And it looks as though it's being suggested that some of these issues may be related to aging workforce. That's right, experience is not there where a lot of people would hope it would be. I mean, it's no different than if you're going in for open heart surgery, you don't want just a general doctor that all they do is general work. You want something that's good, somebody that's reputable, somebody with very high levels of experience, somebody that knows that business. Because, if you're going under, it certainly leaves a lot to obviously risk and chance. But same thing goes when you're talking about airlines. When every time you step on an airplane, it's bad enough that people get anxious and get nervous and excited. But when you step on that plane, we're all putting a lot of trust and faith in the people, the pilots, the co-pilots. to make sure the plane gets up and lands safely at the other end so you can enjoy your destination. We all hope for that, and we all expect it. We hold this to a high level of standard. But there's conversations, and it certainly makes people wonder what's been going on in this last couple months with all of these plane incidents. Well, it's being suggested that the idea of bringing back some retirees who have previous air traffic control experience, bring them back to the fold, bring them back out of retirement, and almost forcing the hand. Now, currently it's not being mandated, but it's being highly suggested that these folks come back. Now, how do they retire? I mean, a lot of these folks, you got to expect when you're an air traffic controller, it's a high risk job. It's a high stress job, but ultimately there's some criteria. The general expectation is if you're an air traffic controller, they retire you at your 56th birthday, the end of that month. So they may, in certain circumstances, extend you out to 61 if you're a high performer and, of course, your health is excessively good. Naturally, they do say and qualify all of this with, you've got to get annual checks. Your eyes have to be at least 20/20. You have to have good hearing. Blood pressure has to be intact, and general health has to be in order. And so if you meet this criteria, they want those people back managing the air traffic control. I mean, I think back years ago when I lived with my parents and, many, many years ago, across the alley, one of our neighbors, and I was a great guy. I chatted with him regularly. I used to ride motorcycles. He had a motorcycle as well. He had a Honda Goldwing, and he said, "Hey, Mark, why don't you give this a try?" And I jumped on. I took it for a little spin around the block. And he was showing me how nicely balanced they are for such a big bike, how these things are so easy to handle. They're actually, easy to juggle around, considering, I guess, it's just the way they balance the weight. But ultimately, that's not the point. The point is, he was an air traffic controller, and I seen him come, and I seen him go, and I see him come and go. How many times in a given day he'd come and go. He has a shift. He'd maybe put in a few hours. I don't know what the circumstances, and I'm sure it's different in every country, but I do know that he spent a lot of trips to and from the airport. He worked out at not at the municipal in our city, but out at the major airport. So he was an air traffic controller for, the way he explained it, a certain altitude. So he kind of, from what I understand, they were sort of divvied up, and they had to look after planes that were entering certain levels. So maybe, that 10 to 20,000 feet, he'd look after that space. There'd be another one that would look after 20 to 30,000 feet and so on. And so there was a lot of this conversation I had with him, and I always found it very intriguing. But one thing he did tell me was air traffic control, absolutely glorious, obviously very risky, especially, if you're not feeling well, and it's obviously that, critical type job role. But, he quantified it by saying, it's hours of boredom followed by moments of sheer chaos and terror. And that's literally how he described it. Because he said that due to the fact that you can sit there for hours where things are boring and ho-hum and there's not a lot of activity. And then, of course, when stuff happens, it gets real, and it gets real fast. And so he would explain it to me. So I know the job is very stressful. And that's why they retire people early. They want to make sure you're peak health, you're able to do your job effectively, safely, because they put a lot of people's lives, in the wing there, so to speak, pardon the pun. But it's the type of job that you want to make sure that you have the best of the best, both in air traffic control and pilots. And so what's happening now is it's being suggested that a lot of these workers go back to work. Like, I could not imagine getting my heart set on retirement, getting out to retirement, starting down my path of my journey the last third of my life, and then having somebody tap on my shoulder and say, get back to work. Now, again, as I say, it's not mandated right now, but it's highly suggested. And I can't imagine why they watch, the current administration is not all that passive. I can't imagine them just sitting back and waiting. I would imagine at some point that we're going to see more and more push to get these workers back to work. I mean, it's a terrible thing. It's hard for those that do have their, the mind and their heart set on it. But realistically, this is just the world we're in. There's a lot of people that go back to work out of retirement because they have to, and others just because they want to. And ultimately, let's face it, at 56 years of age, that's a nice early year or years to retire. And I can certainly attest, me being at 54 right now, I'm almost 55. I can pretty much relate. I'm in a state of mind where I really don't want to go back to a corporate grind, a corporate job. I like mixing with people, sure. I like doing my job, but I like doing my side hustle and having my freedom even more. That's what I value. Time with the family, time to do these walks, have these talks, have some coffee. I value that time more than sitting in an office banging away, wearing out a keyboard. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Could you imagine if your employer tapped you and said, nope, you know what? You're going back to work. And you didn't want to? Or maybe on the other end of the scale, be careful in the career you choose. Hope to see each and every one of you all in the next one. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.